How's it going, everyone? My name is True Wonder Dog, and today we're here to talk about how underrated is Jade. If you recall, I made a tier list a while back, and in that video I discussed how Jade is a lot better than people give her credit for. And then only a couple weeks later, who did we see a ton at Combo Breaker? My girl Jade. This character is honestly really good. So without any further ado, let's have a look at this character, starting off with her really good normals. So first up, we have the uppercut. Jade has quite easily one of the best uppercuts in the entire game. Definitely top 3 uppercuts in the game. Hits pretty darn far in front of her, directly above her, and even behind her as well. So characters like Garrus can't even cross you up and do a body splash after knocking you down. If they try, you can just uppercut them and you'll win every time. So it's a really good uppercut. And then we have her back two, the wiggle stick. This move is a bit tougher to use than her uppercut. You can't quite be as YOLO with it. But when the opponent's a little bit outside jumping distance, it can be a decent anti-air, and it's also very easy to hit confirm. Just do be warned, it is a high attack, so the opponent could duck under it and do a low attack, or an uppercut if you're way too close. And since the move does have very long recovery, they could also jump over it if you're not careful and just hit you for a full jump in combo. So it does take a bit of responsibility to use, but it's still a very good move. And then we have down 3. This move has pretty darn good range, and it's only 8 frames of startup, so it's 1 frame slower than her down 1, but this thing's range is not very good. But down 3, really good range, and down 4, only 10 frames, and also ducks under a lot of high attacks, so down 3 and down 4 are really good and have decent range. And then last but not least, we have her forward throw. Now the crushing blow criteria are the same for her as they are for every other character, however just like Shao Kahn, she can combo after it, only it's even easier to actually do, and the combo damage you get is pretty darn insane for not spending any meter. So even though Jade is primarily a zoner, she's still very deadly up close thanks to this throw. It's honestly really good. So that all about covers her best normal attacks, so next up let's have a look at all these different attack strings. So as you can see, Jade has quite a few attack strings, however, very similar to Katana, you're only going to use a handful of these, so don't be intimidated. First up, we have Baited. Now, this string is good against beginners, but outside of that, not the best string. However, oddly enough, the third hit is safer on block than the first two. So if the opponent does block, you're actually better off finishing it. Now, this move has a crushing blow, but it's one of the more useless ones, so the first hit has to be either blocked or whiffed entirely, and when the second and third hit land, you get the launcher. And the damage you get afterwards is honestly pretty darn good, but the odds of actually landing this is not very high, especially at a competitive level. The only way I could ever see it happening is if the opponent whiffs a very long recovery move, and you just try to punish it with this. Because that second hit does have a ton of range on it, but honestly, I kinda do still wish they would change the credentials for that crushing blow. It just doesn't seem very likely to happen, and I hate when crushing blows are basically never seen, even at low level. So if they did feel like buffing one thing about Jade, I'd say make that crushing blow a bit more reliable. And then we have Teaser. This move is pretty darn unsafe on block, so it is a bit risky. However, that second hit is an overhead, so instead you can do a Denian Spark. And now you have a 50-50 on block. Now you do live and die by this mix-up, because if the opponent blocks either one, it's now their turn, and if you're too close, it's a full combo punish for them, so it is very risky, but the mix-up is still there, so if you're good at reading the opponent, you have a really good 50-50 right here. Not to mention, that first hit can be a pretty decent anti-air if the opponent's right about here when they land, you can catch them with both hits. So it is a somewhat decent anti-air, back two is better, but this can also work in some situations, I use it quite a lot. And next up we have Tiny Dancer. There's a sneaky low here on the second hit, and it's also very safe on block as well. It's also pretty darn good for ending corner combos sometimes, so it's a somewhat useful string. You don't see it very much in the neutral, but it is safe, so it has that going for it, and as mentioned earlier, it's pretty darn good for ending corner combos since it has that knockdown. And then we have Ip Girl. This move is very good, but once again you live and die by the mix-up. So that second hit is also an overhead, so if the opponent blocks the first hit, you can do a Denian Spark, and it's a pretty darn good mix-up. Now if they do start crouching, because you keep doing this over and over again, then you have a meterless combo starter, which is pretty darn cool. Just be wary of the timing. If you do it too early, that shadow kick will whiff, unless they block the first hit and get hit by the second, in which case you want to do it right away. It's kind of tricky in that regard, but once you learn how to combo consistently in both situations, this is a very good mix-up tool. And next up we have Fatal Attraction. This is your go-to move for ending combos most of the time, though the first 3 hits are dial-in, so if you don't do all 3, you won't even get the second hit, so just keep that in mind. You gotta have quick fingers. And then if you do want to do it in the neutral, since it is a very reliable mid attack, it's pretty fast and has decent range, make sure if they block it, you want to do that 4th hit, since that is +5 on block. It's a pretty good way to keep yourself safe, however do be warned the opponent could flawless block and take their turn back, so don't be too predictable with it, especially if your opponent's really good. And then we have Adenian Rush. This attack actually hits low, so it's a good mix-up when you're right in the opponent's face. If they're scared and trained to constantly block, you have this overhead that starts off combos, or this low that can also start off combos. So it's pretty darn scary, especially in the corner with Deadly Butterfly, so you do have a 50-50, but Jade has to be very close for it to actually work. Even so, this low can be pretty scary and it starts up pretty darn quick. And then we have Killer Charisma. I'm not sure how to feel about this string, I never honestly use it, though the damage is pretty darn high. So if you can combo into it consistently, it does net you more damage than a lot of other stuff like this. That's 3 hits, 85, this is 2 hits, and it gets 97, so it is better in terms of damage, but because that second hit is a low, you're just not going to get it as reliably, especially online during your combos, but it is a more damaging option if you do want to go for it, but outside of that I don't see it being very useful. And then last but also least, we have My Pleasure. This string I don't recommend doing ever. I think it's meant to be a whiff punish or maybe even a low crush since she hops into the air, but the first hit is -4 and if you finish it, it's even more punishable, so you don't want to do this most of the time. I just don't recommend it at all. I say forget this string even exists unless you do want to do that godlike read and jump over a low attack, but I'm not even sure if that's very reliable, so I say if you want to main Jade, just go ahead and forget about this string. It's honestly not that useful unless you want to hang yourself. And that's about it for Jade's attack strings. She's honestly really darn good. I just wish this crushing blow was a bit better, but honestly she's still a very good character, so even if they don't change that, she's always going to be good as long as they don't touch her. But if they did make one change, I'd say make this a bit easier to get. Maybe make it on counter hit or as a punish, something cool like that. But next up, let's have a look at her special moves. And once again, there's a ton of stuff to break down here, so let's start off with the Razorang. Now at first glance, a regular projectile with pretty darn slow startup. Here's the crazy part. If you amplify it, it's not only safe, but it's +7 on block. So on hit, it's a mix-up, and on block, it's also great for pressure. It's honestly a really good projectile, far better than it deserves to be. So don't forget about this move. If the opponent ever blocks your stuff, you can amplify this move and keep yourself plus on block. It's really good. And then we have the Air Razorang, which is still really darn good. Now on block, it's pretty dangerous to do up close, it's very minus, but if you enhance it, it's completely safe, so it's really darn good. And if you enhance it, you also stay in the air for a very long time. So any characters with really strong ground game or just low to the ground projectiles, even higher projectiles that aren't specifically anti-airs, this dodges pretty much every single one. It's a really good move, far better than it deserves to be. And that second one, by the way, will always catch you. Even if you're at full screen, you have to block it. It's really good. So Air Razorang, easily one of the best things in Jade's kit. Very good, just as good as the ground Razorang, but for different reasons. And then we have the Upward Razorang. Not as good as the other two, but still has its purposes. It could be an anti-air, though the down 2 is better, and if they're outside that range, you want to do back 2. So it's not the best anti-air. Instead, oddly enough, the enhanced version can be good for combos, though it's very specific. So while the Upward Razorang isn't quite as useful, it does still have a purpose. You're just not going to see it quite as much as the other two since they're so darn good. And next up we have Dodging Shadows. Pretty straightforward move. Once Jade turns purple, she is immune to all projectiles. So not only is she a great zoner and has pretty good ways to already dodge projectiles, but this just makes her even better at it. Now if she gets hit, this does go away, so you can't be right in the opponent's face when doing it, and if you're too close when activating, they do have time to punish you. It recovers fairly quick, but not quick enough to avoid a punish when you're about this distance, so you want to be much further away when setting it up. The cool thing is once you go purple, the opponent can't threaten you with any kind of projectiles. It's really cool. And then we have Adenian Spark. Not much to say, fast moving, low hitting projectile, so as mentioned earlier, pretty good mix up if the attack string normally ends in an overhead. You just do this instead, and now you have a 50-50. Now it is blockable, but it's very tough to do, especially online. It's pretty tough to react to, so it's a great projectile. Even from a distance, it can be pretty darn good if the opponent's not expecting it, but most of the time you're going to use Razorang, but still, it's a really good projectile, great for mix-ups, very fast, and hits low. Still a great projectile. And next up we have Temptation. This is a parry attack. so it's pretty darn good as far as parries go. And then if you enhance it, you get a bit more damage, and if you enhance it twice, you get a crushing blow. Now you might not see it very often since Jade does prefer to keep her distance, but it's still a pretty darn good parry. Just do be warned, parries do not work on jump ins or low attacks. So if you get too predictable, the opponent's going to start sweeping you or just doing short hops, all that crazy stuff. So don't abuse it, but it's still a pretty good parry. And then we have Deadly Butterfly. Now during the stress test, this move was a bit more useful, since this attack did not actually start off combos, so instead you would do this and cancel into Deadly Butterfly. But now this move does combo, Deadly Butterfly is not nearly as useful. It's actually fully punishable according to frame data, but it's not as long on block, so a lot of people don't know how to correctly punish it. Even the Combo Breaker, a lot of pros were not punishing this move despite it being unsafe according to frame data, so there is that going for it, but honestly outside of a few corner combo options, it's not that good of a move anymore. And then last but not least we have Blazing Nitro Kick. This move has crazy good range and it's great for ending combos, however it is a high attack, so the opponent could duck under it, and it's also very, very unsafe on block, so either way you're in trouble if you don't use it correctly. However, if you do land it twice in a row, you get a very damaging crushing blow. Flashy stuff, and yes, you can enhance that still if you want a bit extra damage. And since you do end most of your combos with this attack, just do one combo and then wait it out, wait for a good whiff punish, and then bam, you get your crushing blow. So it's actually not that hard to get reliably, even in a competitive setting. And that's about it for Jade's attack strings in this first tournament variation, and I honestly do think it's the better of the two. So next up, let's have a look at her second variation and see if there's any ways we could improve it and make it a bit more tournament viable. So as you can see, you don't gain very many moves in this variation, and you also lose access to her Air Razorang, which is very, very good. And you also don't have her Adenian Spark anymore. And that's why I think you don't ever see this variation at high level, you just lose access to too many key things. But let's go ahead and talk about these new special moves. So first up we have Pole Vault. This attack is safe on block and leaps into the air, so it does avoid a lot of attacks, including certain high attacks. And since it is rather fast, it can be hit confirmed fairly easily. And then if you enhance it, you get a bit more damage, though you do have to enhance it before it actually lands, so it's a bit of a gamble. However, if you go purple, and then run all the way in from downtown and enhance it, you actually get a crushing blow. You just have to bait the opponent into doing something a bit risky, and then you can land it. And then on top of all that, you can also cancel this move by tapping down twice. Now it does cost you meter, however it can be good for pressuring the opponent, going for some more 50-50s. I think the main issue is it does cost a bar, and a lot of people would much rather spend that bar on something else, but it is still an option that you do have in your arsenal, so make sure not to forget about it if you do want to rock this variation. And then last but not least we have Blazing Nitro Kick. Now not much changes here, just if you enhance it you stay in the front now. You don't switch sides, and honestly that's a pretty big deal in my opinion, because it means you no longer have to worry about giving up corner advantage. I actually do like that aspect of this variation, I just don't like how canceling Pole Vault costs you one extra slot. I feel like maybe if we had a third extra move, this variation would be a little bit more viable, but as it stands right now, the Pole Vault just isn't that good of a move when it takes up 2 slots, and while the Blazing Nitro Kick staying in front is a pretty nice feature, it's not enough to offset the fact that we lose access to Air Razorang and Adenian Spark. So I feel like maybe Pole Vault should only cost 1 slot and come with the cancel by default, and then give us a third move to make this variation a bit better. But please let me know your thoughts on Jade down in the comments below. Do you think she's godlike, or do you think she could use a buff here and there? Please let me know down below in the comments. And while you're down there, please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, it really does help my channel out a ton. And finally, why not keep that combo going by subscribing and ringing that bell? That way you never miss a future video. Make sure to come back next time, and as always, stay underdogs.